I wanted to go through the chapter of Zechariah 7 all on its own because I believe that it stands apart from what we have been going through so far. This chapter really gets down to the nitty-gritty, the condition of the heart. That we don't do things out of fear or obligation or duty or guilt. We don't do things because we think we should or because someone tells us we should. We do them because we want to, out of a spirit of thankfulness, out of a spirit of gratitude. In this chapter, it really underscores the point that Israel missed and continues to miss with the whole obedience to the law conversation. They're missing the part that is duty or obligation or what they think they should be doing. The precedent that was established by their first forefather Abraham was faith comes first and then obedience comes after faith. If obedience comes first, what are you being obedient to? In their case, this was the Old Testament law. That cannot save them. It never could, and it never will be able to. Abraham had faith. It was counted to him for righteousness, and then he was obedient as a result of faith. This is what Israel has backwards. They do not possess faith. They are trying to do works and be obedient enough. And we know that that cannot save us. Faith must come first, and then we are obedient as a result of that faith, as a demonstration of that faith. Take Abraham, for example. He believed God. It was counted to him for righteousness. And then he had his whole house circumcised as an obedience to that faith. Then there was the near sacrifice of Isaac as a demonstration of that faith. He didn't know what the outcome was. If you go to the book of Hebrews, it tells us that he thought that God would resurrect Isaac. Obviously, that didn't happen. God stayed the hand of Abraham and offered a sacrifice in Isaac's place. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide a sacrifice. Is what came out of that. But this chapter really underscores the point that faith must come first. Obedience is great, but what are you being obedient to if you don't first have faith? Nothing that can save you. Even worse off was this people in the Old Testament who had God, who had visible signs of God being with them. There were supernatural instances galore. And they still couldn't be obedient. And they certainly weren't faithful. This is the root cause of Israel's issues throughout the Old Testament, and what will be the root cause of Israel's issues in the New Testament, unsaved Israel, until she comes to salvation, which we know will not be until just before Jesus returns at the second coming. In the law, in the Old Testament specifically, and I talked about this as we went through the book of Daniel, specifically related to the Babylonian captivity, is one of the curses from the law was to be removed from their land for not following, for not being obedient. This was what happened, again, the Babylonian captivity. That was a direct result of Israel not being faithful to God, not being obedient to his commandments, as they were removed from their land. This is also what happened as a result of the rejection of Jesus upon his triumphal entry, was the recompense for that, the direct recompense, as stated in Luke 19 and seen evidence of in Luke 21, were the events of 70 AD. The destruction of the temple, the second temple, and the diaspora. That Israel's land would be desolate. This also is going to happen through the 70th week, is once the abomination of desolation happens, Israel scatters. Whoever doesn't flee and is preserved, protected by God in the wilderness, will either be killed or scattered among the nations, and his land will be parted. We learn about that in Daniel 11:36 through, say, 39, midpoint of the week and directly after, pertaining to the land of Israel. The ones who scatter his people and part his land will be judged. That is the judgment in the Valley of Decision, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. See Joel 3, specifically for that reason. They will not escape his hand for scattering his people and parting his land. But we see on account of Israel's disobedience, their continued disobedience to God in the Old Testament, and then under New Covenant, their rejection of Christ at the triumphal entry, leading to the shutting up of the Old Covenant and the institution of the New Covenant. But their continued rejection of him, 70 AD, they get scattered. They go into the 70th week because they continue to reject Christ, eventually to be killed, be scattered. A remnant, and only a remnant will be preserved. That is what Zechariah 8 is going to talk about, is the remnant that is preserved. Zechariah 7. This is going to be Israel's lot in life until they get it. Zechariah 7:1. It came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius that the word of the Lord came unto Zechariah in the 4th year of the 9th month, even in Kislev. Just as a quick recap, Babylonian captivity ends after the 70 years prophesied by Jeremiah. According to Daniel's statute, the second empire after Babylon would be Medo-Persia. Darius was king of the Medes, Cyrus was the king of the Persians. Cyrus is the one that gave the go-ahead to build the temple. The Mede side was Darius. So it was in the 4th year of Darius, which means that it was 4 years after Daniel's vision, 4 years after the events of Daniel 5. That was the night the handwriting on the wall, Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son, was deposed and killed, and Darius took his place. So to tell us where we're at, that's where we're at. Came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius that the word of the Lord came unto Zechariah in the 4th day of the 9th month, even in Kislev. And I could be wrong about that, as I sit here and say that there were more than one Darius, so it might not have been the same, but I do believe it was the same. When they had sent unto the house of God Sherezer and Regemelech and their men to pray before the Lord, and to speak unto the priests which were in the house of the Lord of hosts, and to the prophets, saying, Should I weep in the 5th month, separating myself as I have done these so many years? Duty, obligation, fear, and guilt. This is what Israel does. It is prayers with vain repetition. It is doing things because they believe they should without understanding the premise behind what they're doing. Then came the word of the Lord of hosts unto me, saying, Speak unto all the people of the land and to the priests, saying, When ye fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th month, even those 70 years, did ye all fast unto me, even to me? Or did you just do it because the law told you to? Did you just do it because you were being obedient to the law without understanding the premise behind the law? Did you do it out of duty, obligation, fear, or guilt? Or because you thought you should? You didn't do it unto me. Your heart was not in that space. You weren't doing it out of faithfulness and willingness to be grateful and thankful for me preserving your life even though you were carted off captive. You did it out of vain repetition. When ye did eat and when ye did drink, did you not eat for yourselves? Drink for yourselves? Should ye not hear the word which the Lord cried by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited in prosperity and the cities thereof round about her, when men inhabited the south on the plain? The word of the Lord came unto Zechariah, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Execute true judgment, and show mercy and compassions every man to his brother, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor. Let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. We don't do things just because we should, out of duty, obligation, fear, guilt, whatever. This is the same thing as God loveth a cheerful giver. We don't give out of duty, obligation, fear, or guilt, or because we believe we should. We do it because we want to. Out of a spirit of gratitude and thankfulness that we have abundance, so we give. We pay it forward. If your heart is not in the right spot and you're not doing it for the right reasons, you might as well not even bother. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, execute true judgment, show mercy and compassions, every man to his brother, oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor. Let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. But they refused to hearken, and pulled away the shoulder and stopped their ears that they should not hear. I told you to do these things and why you should do these things, and no one was listening. So you can sit there and you can pray on your fasts and you can hold your feasts and you can mourn on the days that you're supposed to. But if you are not doing it for the right reasons, why even bother? Yea, they made their hearts as an adamant stone, lest they should hear the law. The words of the Lord of hosts has sent in his spirit by the former prophets. Therefore came a great wrath from the Lord of hosts. And they were unpolitely excused from their land as a recompense for not being obedient, for not being faithful, more than not being obedient, but also for not being obedient. Because obedience without faith is worthless. Therefore it has come to pass that as he cried and they would not hear, so they cried and I would not hear, saith the Lord God, the Lord of hosts. But I scattered them with a whirlwind among the nations whom they knew not. Thus the land was desolate after them, that no man passed through nor returned, for they laid the pleasant land desolate. The land that they're in is a gift from God. A God that they don't recognize because they don't recognize his Savior. There is a coming recompense. There is a coming judgment for Israel for that. Losing the land will be the least of their worries, but that will happen too. Until such a time as they finally get right with God, they finally recognize Christ. And then all of that will change. However, by the time they do, it will only be a remnant. Zechariah 8:1. Again the word of the Lord of hosts came to me, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. Remember, I talked about this in a previous video, that God is jealous for his land and will pity his people. That's what Joel 2 says of Jesus and his people at the second coming. Jealous for, because Israel is his possession. And the people of Israel are his. Called by his name. His name is actually stamped right on the city of Jerusalem. Judah and Jerusalem are important to God. They are his, and he will not allow anyone to take them from him. It is for that reason that he has always preserved a remnant according to the election of grace. After the flood, there was a remnant. After every single judgment, the Babylonian captivity, there was a remnant that was allowed to go back. Through the 70th week, there will be a remnant preserved according to the election of grace. But as we learn in Zechariah 13, that remnant will be a third. Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. This is talking about second coming. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. The streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, if it be marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it also be marvelous in mine eyes, saith the Lord of hosts. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country. I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God in truth and in righteousness. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong, ye that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets, which were in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of hosts was laid, that the temple might be built. He's talking about the second temple. He's talking about in these days. Not in those days, which is in the future, but in these days. So it's a reference to the second temple. But before these days, there was no hire for man, nor any hire for beast, neither was there any peace to him that went out or came in because of the affliction. For I set all men, everyone against his neighbor. But now I will not be unto the residue of this people as in the former days, saith the Lord of hosts. For the seed shall be prosperous, the vine shall give her fruit, the ground shall give her increase, the heavens shall give their due, and I will cause the remnant of this people to possess all these things. This is a twofold prophecy because it relates to the remnant going to Israel at that time to build the temple and eventually the city walls and the city gates, which actually was the beginning of the 70 weeks prophecy. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision of prophecy, to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. So the temple command was given in the year following the Babylonian captivity, circa 537 BC. But 445 BC is when the 70 weeks clock started with the command to go forth and to rebuild Jerusalem. City walls, city gates. That would happen. And then Israel would be carted off to the nations 70 AD when Jerusalem was sacked and that very temple destroyed. They're going to build another temple in the future. And then they're going to be desolated and carted off again into the nations, taken out of their land as a direct recompense for their continued disobedience. But the first thing that Jesus does after they come to saving knowledge and he returns at the second coming is to give, with the great sound of a trumpet, to give the command to his angels to gather his elect from the four winds from one end of heaven to the other, to bring them back, to plant them permanently in their land, and to give them increase. So this is talking about Second Temple up through 70 AD and also Third Temple through the 70th week up to and including the Second Coming and into the kingdom. There's a twofold reference here. It shall come to pass that as you were a curse among the heathen, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so will I save you, and ye shall be a blessing. Fear not, but let your hands be strong. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, as I thought to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, saith the Lord of hosts, and I repented not. So again have I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem and unto the house of Judah. Fear ye not. Determined to do well by you. These are the very things that ye shall do. Speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor. Execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. Let no false oath, and love no false oath. For all these things that I hate, saith the Lord. Love God and love people. That's what the law boiled down to, is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do these things and we're good. Because if you love, then that automatically means that your heart is in the right spot. The word of the Lord of hosts came unto me, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, the fast of the 10th, shall be to the house of Judah joy and gladness and cheerful feast. Therefore love the truth and peace. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, it shall come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, Let us go speedily to pray before the Lord and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. This is talking about in the kingdom. Zechariah 14 is going to talk about this, that once a year people will go up to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles to worship Christ. Also, Isaiah 66 talks about this. After the judgment of the second coming and in the kingdom, when Israel is set atop the nations and Jesus is ruling, talks about the Lord will come with fire, with his chariots like a whirlwind, render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues. They shall come and see my glory, and I will set a sign among them. I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud, that draw the bow, Tubal, and Javan, to the isles far off, have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. They shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord out of all nations, upon horses and chariots, litters, upon mules, and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, saith the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. So basically it's saying that everyone from all over is going to be coming to Jerusalem for the purpose of seeing Jesus and being around Jesus. The inhabitants of one city shall say unto another, shall go to another, saying, let us speedily start that over. And the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem and to pray before the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come, in those days, future prophecy. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. This is again a twofold prophecy, because that happened when Jesus was on earth the first time. People came from near and far to see him. It will also happen in the kingdom when Jesus is here after his second coming. They will come to see him. So this is 2 times it's going to happen, but most prominently related to the second coming. I will say that there's probably direct relationship here to the building of the temple that they were, or the temple that they were building at that time, the second temple, because they were told to not lose hope, because they needed to continue building that temple, because Jesus would need it for his ministry. It would be the temple that he would use when he came. So it is very likely that the immediate reference is to his first coming and people coming from all over to see him. However, it also has very direct implication with Ezekiel's temple in the kingdom. They will come from all over to see him as well. And that is documented in Zechariah 14 and Isaiah 66, to name a couple of places. When we next meet, we are going to talk about the triumphal entry, Zechariah 9. This is one of 2 primary references in the prophets that Israel had to understand the time of her Messiah and the visitation, the presentation of the kingdom, the king coming to bring the kingdom. They missed it. Why did they miss it? What was there other than Jesus and the donkey? What were the implications there? So we're going to go through that in the next video, Zechariah 9. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. So that is specifically a reference to the triumphal entry. And the implication of the triumphal entry was the first presentation of the kingdom. So if you guys have any questions or comments, let me know. With that, I will bid you adieu. I'll see you guys later.